All right, so welcome to this afternoon's tutor talk. It's about citizenship and in particular strategies for teaching the N400 speaking and listening test. And if you're not sure what I'm talking about, you'll find out very soon. So I am Nicole Menino Johnson. I'm the Special Projects Manager at Literacy Pittsburgh. And one of those projects is citizenship. And I manage our citizenship program, and I've created the YouTube content around citizenship and developed the classroom where you can access a lot of the teaching materials that coincide with the videos. So I'm happy to be here with you today, and I'm so glad you're able to join. And to get started, we're going to do a poll, and we're going to stretch your digital literacy a little bit. So if you go to slido.com, and there's this number, and you can enter that number.
I don't know what you mean to do. How can I do that while I'm on Zoom?
You just open your internet browser and type slido.com.
Nicole, I'm sorry, a lot of our tutors are not that tech savvy.
That's fine.
Opening two windows at once is tricky.
Okay. We can skip it if it's too difficult.
Excuse me, I've originally had difficulty with that, but I found that if I minimize my screen, then I can have access to opening the browser.
Yeah.
If that helps anybody.
The other way you could do it to go to Slido is to use your phone. If you have a smartphone, that would be another way to do it. Sorry.
So
yeah, so you can, if you're on Zoom, there's a menu and there's like a view, and if it's in full screen view, you won't be able to see another window. So you can change the view so that you're not in full screen, and then you can open up the other window. And I see some people have had some success. So if it's not working for you to do it on Slido, you can just type in the chat as well, or just say something you have never done. So I see skydive. I've also never been skydiving before. Bungee jumping, parachute, hike the entire Appalachian Trail. Yeah.
Fly an airplane.
Fly an airplane. Yes. Okay. Oh, someone's never played tennis.
Oh, that's a shame.
It is a shame.
Okay. Someone's never gone spelunking.
What is spelunking?
Who would like to tell her?
Caving.
caving.
Oh,
Getting muddy caves.
okay. I've never done it and really don't have a desire of it. Thank you for explaining.
Yeah. Okay. And has anyone been to the moon?
No.
Yes. All right. Great. All right. And you'll see this is an activity not only to get to know you a little bit, but we're using a particular grammatical construction, present perfect. And that's going to come into play in your citizenship lessons about the speaking and listening test. Ah, someone's never eaten a 7-course meal. Well, I recommend it. I've done it. Yeah. All right, great. All right. And I'd like to learn a little bit about you. So if you could introduce yourself and say something about what your student or how long you've been tutoring or just anything about yourself. It doesn't have to be about your student. And Joyce, would you go first?
Okay, do you want me to just say it or write it?
Say it.
I am taking Spanish lessons with Duolingo.
Oh, okay. And how is that going?
Very well.
Good, thank you. Nice to meet you.
Good, likewise.
Yeah. And Deborah, can you introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi, I'm Debbie McNichol. I'm actually in the North Hills area. And my tutoring experience has been great. I moved from the other side of the state just about 2 years ago. And I started right away, and I'm just absolutely loving it. I have some students from South Korea, one from Yemen, one from Turkey, and what's the other? There's one more. And I just love learning so much about their culture. I feel like I learn as much, almost as much from them as I hope they're learning from me.
Thank you.
Mhm.
And Norma, can you introduce yourself?
I'm Norma and I live in Squirrel Hill. I'm retired and I had a language student for a short while. She was learning English. Her primary language was Arabic, but then she stopped and I'm waiting to meet. I asked for a citizenship student, and Usama is trying to connect me with a citizenship student, and we haven't yet met each other, but that's when he let us know about this particular training. I thought it would be useful when I meet that student, and I think it's someone from a Latin American country who's studying for citizenship. So I'm looking forward to whatever I can learn here.
Great. Paul, can you introduce yourself?
Certainly, Paul Battisti. I live in Mount Lebanon, South Hills, and I've been tutoring now for a little over a year. I have two students. One is Arabic derivation. She's from Iraq, and the other is from Nicaragua. She's actually about to take her citizenship test. So she's been studying with another organization to do I think the N400 and other parts. And I've been working with her on the conversational skills, the small talk ahead of the interview.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought maybe I could pick up some tips on delving into that a little bit more to help her with her N400.
Great, thank you. And Susan, can you introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Susan. I'm kind of going by my maiden name right now, which is Lucetta. I live in the North Hills, almost up on the Butler County line. I'm living with my father. But to make it one sentence, I'll just say I've been helping other people, my peers, learn difficult things since I was in 4th grade.
Great, thank you. And Jacinta, can you introduce yourself?
Hi, yes, I'm Jacinta. I also live in Mount Lebanon. I've been tutoring for a year now, and I have a couple from Afghanistan, and they've been here. I've been a year and a half. They've been here, and they have a son who just started 1st grade. So I'm trying to kind of incorporate something that I'd be able to help him with his homework.
Mm-hmm.
But they're coming along very well.
Thank you. And John, can you introduce yourself?
Sure. My name's John, of course. I live in the central North Shore. I've been tutoring for quite a while. I started tutoring before I retired as a volunteer at local literacy centers in the eastern Pennsylvania. And now I did take a short period to go teach in China. That was quite exciting. And taught college students. And so now had several different students from different countries. My current student is from Spain, and she's done quite well actually for herself. She probably in the mid-30s. She has a college degree in accounting, and her English is probably intermediate to advanced, and she landed herself a job at PNC
Wow.
last January, and just trying to keep her head above water with going over phrasing, different phrases she learns at work, and learning the different accounting protocols. So yeah, doing very well. I'm very surprised. Very not surprised. She's really done very well. So.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Students are always amazing to me, how resilient and how fast they pick things up. And yeah. Karen, can you introduce yourself?
I'm from the North Hills. I've been working with a woman from Morocco for 2 years. She's been here for 5 years now. Her husband just applied for citizenship, and she would like to start the process as well. So I would like to work with her on that as well. So that's why I tuned in today.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And Rich, can you introduce yourself?
Sure, I'll turn on my camera here. Good afternoon. My name is Rich Goldman. I've been tutoring. This is my 3rd year, and I've been working with students from China, from Korea, and currently one from Mexico. So anyway, I just wanted to keep it to one sentence.
Thank you. All right, so it's really nice to hear from everybody, and it just reminds me of how diverse our area really is. Everyone has mentioned different countries, and one of the things that I really love about this job is learning from the students, meeting them, and I've also loved that part of it and watching them grow. All right, so we're just going to go over very quickly the path to citizenship, and then we'll get into the specifics on the speaking and listening part of the test. So to be eligible to become a citizen, there's a few things that applicants need. The first here says, be of good moral character. This is demonstrated in the N400 application and in the background search. The other is be a permanent resident for 5 years, or we say in the vernacular, green card holder. Or if they're married to a United States citizen, they need to be a permanent resident for 3 years. And that's also true if they're in the United States Armed Forces. They also can become a citizen after 3 years. And the second requirement is to be over 18. Then they have to demonstrate knowledge of the English language and civics, and they take an oath of allegiance to the United States. So these are the basic requirements to become a citizen. When someone is eligible, they've been here for 5 years with a green card, they send their application, and the actual application is called the N400. So that's why we're using that term, N400. And they send that to the USCIS, the United States Citizenship and Immigration Services. After they send it, which this past couple years has been a little crazy with this process, they can either send it online, which is the fastest way to send it, or some applicants do it on paper and mail it. With COVID and with some changes to the administration and different leadership, there's been a lot of delays with this process. So whenever it gets to someone at the USCIS, that's when it is received. That's what starts like the clock on when their application is received. And they will be sent a notice of receipt. Okay. Then after that, they will get a biometrics appointment, which is just fingerprints. And after the biometrics appointment, they'll be scheduled for an interview. And then if they pass the interview, great, they will be scheduled for an oath ceremony to take the oath of allegiance. And if they do not pass some or all of the interview, they have an opportunity to retest. And they will be sent another date, usually within 90 days of not passing the first time. So right now, the current processing time, which is from the date that the USCIS receives the application, whether that's an online submission or someone opens the envelope and they've received it. Right now, it takes anywhere between 8 and 16 months on average for that process to happen. Some students, it takes shorter than that. So if a student is like not quite sure, should I apply yet? I'm not sure if my English is ready. Make sure they're ready before they apply, because I've had some students where it was 2 months. And then on the other extreme, I've had students where it's been 1.5 years, almost 2 years now. So I don't know if things were lost in the COVID void, but it can vary greatly. And it also depends on the specifics of their application. So they're not all equal. There's a lot of questions on there. Different questions require more background searches. And so just because one student applies on this date and another student applies on the same date, it doesn't mean they're going to take the same amount of time. Okay, so when they get to the actual test and interview, what is on the test? There are 4 parts of the test. Speaking and listening, which is what we're going to talk about today. Civics, which is probably the most popular, or not popular, but the most well-known part of the test is the civics test, where they're asking questions about American government and current leaders and a little bit of US history. Reading and writing. So those are the 4 parts of the citizenship interview. There's a lot of materials on how to teach civics. There's a lot of materials on reading and writing. There are some materials on speaking and listening, which is the N400, but they're a little harder to find. And so I wanted to do this talk so that we can go over ways to incorporate it and also kind of emphasize how important it is, because it's actually, for many applicants, it's the most difficult part of the interview. Okay, so the speaking and listening test, also called the interview. The whole thing is the interview. So there's 4 parts of the interview. This is the speaking and listening portion. The officers begin to judge applicants' spoken English as soon as they meet them in the waiting room. So the small talk, I think it was Paul that you were mentioning, you work with your student on small talk. That's really important. It can be just simple things like, oh, how's the weather? How did you get here today? Why are you here today? What do you miss about your country? This beginning interaction is when they start judging how well the student understands and speaks English. And then when they go into the room with the officer, during the speaking and listening portion of the test, they're asked questions related to the N400 application for naturalization. We'll get into a little more of what that involves. Officers may ask applicants to define terms that are in the question, particularly in part 12, which I will kind of explain in a little bit what that means. Applicants can ask officers to repeat and rephrase questions. So that is encouraged, and actually asking questions and asking for clarification shows a higher level of English. And the officers judge the applicant's ability to understand and respond appropriately to conversational questions and interview questions. So both that like pre-interview part, any small talk, this is all part of the assessment. The actual Form N400 is a complex 20-page legal document. Applicants should be prepared to discuss every question that they answered on this form. So they have to understand all those questions in English and be able to explain and potentially define some of the terms. It depends on the officer. So some of the sample questions from Part 12. Part 12 is the most well-known part. A lot of people talk about this as the yes/no section. Have you ever been a habitual drunkard? Have you ever been a member of a guerrilla group? Have you ever been declared legally incompetent? Many students memorize and say no to all of these questions. Okay. This is not a best practice. We don't want them to just memorize, because some officers will follow up and they will ask, what is a habitual drunkard? What is legally incompetent? What is a guerrilla group? Okay. And so that's when people get stumped. And it's really varies on the officer, and they have the ability to decide what questions they're going to ask, which questions they're going to ask for follow-up on or further explanation. And then finally, as a reminder, tutors should never help a student with actually completing the N400. We can refer students for free legal services. This is a legal document, and there are implications for both the applicant and for whoever helps them. And so I will never help a student with this. I will always refer them. No one at Literacy Pittsburgh assists with this part of it. It's just not our expertise. Okay, so the parts. So the N400 actually has 18 different sections. The officer may ask about any or all of the sections during the interview. And this is what they call the speaking and listening test. The officer's judging the English language skills of the applicant and is also clarifying answers on the application or asking for more information. And during this process, the applicant is under a legal oath, kind of like in a courtroom. Okay, tutor role. As tutors at Literacy Pittsburgh, our role is to prepare the students to answer verbally the questions on the N400. We can prepare students to ask for repetition, to ask for clarification, and we can prepare them to define those really hard vocabulary terms on the N400. We can't offer advice on what to answer. If they say, what should I say? Okay. Have you ever been a habitual drunkard? We can't tell them you should say yes or no, but we can tell them you have to answer truthfully. We can explain what that means. And then usually as soon as they realize what it means, they're like, oh no, I'm not a drunkard. But we can offer advice on how to word things. And we can always refer students for free legal service at JFCS Immigration Legal Services. Norma, did you have a question?
I do. You mentioned in the former slide that they're answering questions under a legal oath. I'm assuming that the officer explains that to them at the beginning of the interview. Is that true?
So this is how it goes. They say, please raise your right hand. Do you promise to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Yes, I do. That's it. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
But you know, do they explain to them what consequences there are if they don't tell the truth?
I don't think so. I think it's implied that they should know about that in advance. They should understand the process before they get there.
Okay.
Yeah. That's also why we refer them for legal services. It's not our role as teachers and tutors that part is not our job. Our job is to help them explain the answers they already have, how to verbalize what they already have answered. Okay. We don't help them fill things out. We can help with knowing what to expect, right? And I teach citizenship as well. And I go over that putting under oath every single class. And they seem to understand, and I teach very beginners. So hopefully they get assistance. If they're not understanding everything in their application, they should get the assistance of a translator. And those are all things that they can get help with through JFCS. All right, so let's talk about strategies that we can use to teach these concepts. So vocabulary is a big one. The N400 interview contains difficult and obscure language. I don't know when the last time I said the word drunkard. It's just not something people say every day. And there's a lot of legalese kind of words that I had to look up and research and figure out what is the difference between these things. So a lot of it is complicated and difficult. The N400 prep, oh, sorry, was there a question?
I do have a question. Since I was thinking about that drunkard question, and in English, we certainly know what it means, but commonly those people now are even legally referred to as alcoholics or chronic alcoholism or something like that. Is that intake officer allowed to substitute words like that?
They can. I think what they'll typically do is they will say it as it's written first, because it is written on the form as, have you ever been a habitual drunkard? And then if an applicant says, you can actually coach your student on, can you say that with different words? Can you explain that in a different way? And then they could say, like an alcoholic. Yeah.
Well, another way that you could easily explain it is to, in my opinion, to point out to the student to look at the root of each of those words, habit and drunk. Do you have a common habit of getting drunk?
Sure, if they know those words, yeah.
And the roots of each of those words will lend to the meaning of habitual drunkard.
Yeah, if your student is advanced enough to be able to study root words, then that could be a good strategy if they're pretty advanced. If you have an intermediate or high beginner, that may be difficult. Or some of our students don't have literacy in their first language, so that may be a challenge. But certainly for our well-educated students, that's a great strategy. And so you should be doing a lot of vocabulary practice in some way. We have developed a series of YouTube videos that also correspond with a Quizlet set, which is like online flashcards. And they also correspond to worksheets that were developed by another organization called US Citizen Pod. The worksheets go over every section, and it's like a dialogue. And then it has a follow-up with the definition in simple language, like, what is a habitual drunkard? Someone who drinks too much every day. And very simple pared down language. And the Voices of Freedom textbook, if anyone's currently teaching and you're using this Voices of Freedom, it does have a section in the back that's an appendix that starts on page 213, and it has some dialogues and sample answers of how to explain some of those terms. Okay. Translation. So some students love Google Translate and they'll translate those terms. This can be a good strategy. However, words in isolation have different meanings than words in context a lot of times. So be careful with it. And if they are using Translate, encourage them to also use an English dictionary. I really like learnersdictionary.com because it provides a very simple explanation or very simple definition. And then have the students, when they actually look, and we're going to look at one of the definitions on Learner's Dictionary in a moment, have them look at the different meanings and guess which one do you think it means in this sentence. I encourage my students that love Translate to add this to their practice and make sure that the translation is matching the meaning in the sentence that we're looking at. Okay, so let us take a look. We're going to look at this example. So the word claimed, okay, and the sentence, the question is, have you ever claimed to be a United States citizen? So if I look up the word as it is in the past tense, claimed, let's take a look at that. Okay, can you see the dictionary now, Learner's Dictionary?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so I looked up claimed in the past tense, and when I do it like that, it only comes up with the verb, okay? I'm just going to show you, if I look up claim, there's going to be a choice between verb, noun, and then small claims court comes up. So this is something to like, it may lend to further grammar. Is this a verb or a noun? And how do we know this? And so if you look it up as is, the claimed, it's going to automatically go to the verb. And that's what it is in this question. And there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 definitions right here of claimed. Okay, so number 1 is say something is true when some people say it's not true. Number 2, say you have something. Number 3, say you have a legal right to be given something. Number 4, to take something that belongs to you or you deserve. Number 5, used to say that someone's attention or time is being given to something. And number 6, to cause the end of someone's life. Which definition is the best one for have you ever claimed to be a citizen?
One.
Think 1?
I think.
Any other different answers?
2B or 3, maybe.
Okay, 2B or 3, say something belongs to you that you deserve or you have the legal right. I'm so glad you said that, Paul, because when they're asking this, they're using the definition for 1. They're really asking, did you ever lie about being a citizen? But so many of my students assume that they're claiming citizenship. They have the right to apply for this. And that's what it means to them. So they're like, yes, I'm doing that right now. I'm claiming citizenship. So this is where the language is a little nuanced and obscure, and it really depends on this context. Because it could mean both things, but the USCIS, I kind of refer to this part as like an interrogation. They're basically is kind of negatively framed a bit. And so we can teach them what they're really asking. Did you ever lie and say you were a citizen, even though you're not a citizen? And the example I usually give is some people want a job that you have to be a citizen. And they fill out an employment application and they say, yes, I'm a citizen. This is an example of claiming to be a citizen. You're lying about it so you can get something. Okay. And the US Citizen Pod worksheets that I talked about, those are all on our Tutor N400 Google Classroom and in the Tutor Hub somewhere, I believe. they all have the correct definitions and an easy to use language. And using the dictionary is a skill that you can be teaching your students. Using this online dictionary, deciphering and determining which definition is correct, looking at the part of speech. These are all skills that can extend from a simple activity, looking at one question on the N400. And then another kind of strategy is some of the vocabulary is repeated very frequently, like current and previous. And so when I'm teaching, you can even use this in the civics part of your lesson. Who's the current president? Right? It's another way of saying now. What's your current job? What's your current address? Are you currently married? And so you can kind of weave this word throughout your different lessons so that it becomes more familiar and they're not associating it with a particular question. A lot of students will memorize. And so like, what's your current address? And so some of my lower students, if I say, what's current mean? They'll say address. No, it's not what it means. It means now. So higher level students, it's a little easier to help them through this, but you can do it with lower level students as well. So if there's the frequent vocabulary like current, previous is a good thing to kind of focus on and help them to understand so they can understand it in many different contexts and internalize the meaning of the word. Okay, and grammar. The speaking test frequently uses present perfect. So the have you ever is the typical construction. Have you ever been a habitual drunkard? Have you ever procured someone for prostitution? Have you ever sold or smuggled illegal drugs or narcotics? Have you ever committed genocide? Have you ever conscripted, recruited or enlisted child soldiers? So really hard words, same construction and grammar. So using a timeline is a good activity if the student is not quite sure what is being asked. We're talking about something that you've done at least one time in your whole life. Have you ever done this? It could have been in your country, it could be in this country, it could be in any country. Have you ever done this thing? And usually when it comes up or like they're not sure, like, have you ever been a member of a group or organization? That could be in your country or that could be right now. Have you ever been arrested or been to jail? That could have been in your country or that could have been now. So they have to answer truthfully. So this is where we don't want them memorizing yes and no. We want them to give a real answer.
I wonder if at the time we teach the word ever, we should make the distinction with never.
You could. Yeah, because that could be the answer. No, I never committed genocide, right? So it is an opposite. That is definitely a strategy where you can use opposites. Yep. And I would start with easier concepts. So if they're not sure what you're asking, have you ever been to New York? Have you ever seen the Statue of Liberty? Have you ever eaten raw fish? And that can be fun, if you can come up with a lot of fun ways to introduce this present perfect concept of time that started somewhere in the past and comes to now, and you had to do it at least once in that time period. My students have had a lot of fun with this, with the have you evers. And no, I never did that. If you have more than one student at the same time, they can ask each other, have you ever done these things? And you can have like a checklist, and you can find people that have never ridden a bike or have never been swimming. And I definitely had a lot of people that have never eaten raw fish. I usually have that one on there. All right. So here's another Slido, which you can either do Slido. If you don't want to do Slido, you can just answer either typing or saying it. Let's choose the best answer for this question. Have you ever claimed to be a US citizen? What's the best answer? Yes, I do. Yes, I have. I applied for citizenship before. No, or no, I never said I was a citizen before. And you can do the same thing with either going to it on your computer or on your phone, or you can type in the chat. Okay, so I'm seeing the most popular answer, no, I never said I was a citizen before, followed with no. So those are both perfectly correct answers. I think the best answer is that most popular one, no, I never said I was a citizen before. The reason why adding explanation is a good strategy is that it demonstrates comprehension. And so if they just say no, 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 no to every question, the officer doesn't know if they really understand the question. But if they ask, have you ever claimed to be a citizen? And your student says, no, I never said I was a citizen before. They know they understand, and they're not going to ask them for that follow-up definition question. So if your student's able to give an answer like that for these questions, that is a great strategy to teach. You can also do similar kind of questions like this with your student, where they choose the best answer. And you can then see, does your student understand what you're talking about? And can they then express it? Time is another big concept. Duration of time, specific dates, ordinal numbers, it comes up in the application. How long have you lived at your current address? When did you come to the United States? What date did you become a legal permanent resident? There's lots and lots to do with time. How many times have you been married? A lot of my students get that confused with how long have you been married? And they'll say 26. No, not how many years. How many different husbands did you have? Or how many different wives did you have? Oh, okay. So time can be complicated, and we have a lot of different ways to ask about it. The simple one is when, but we also use what for dates a lot. What is your date of marriage? What is your date of birth? These are the ways that they will be asked. So you can do a lot of time lessons kind of interspersed with the rest of it. Ordinal numbers, you can use those with calendar activities. You can also use that with children. How many children do you have? Tell me about your first child. Tell me about your second child. Tell me about your third child. And practicing that pronunciation is a little difficult with the TH sound. A lot of people don't like sticking their tongue out. But it can be fun to tell them to practice in the mirror and stick their tongue out. And we see tongue and teeth when we're speaking in English. Other languages, they don't, they have more of a closed mouth. So if that's a challenge for your student, have them practice with like opening their mouth, sticking their tongue out. really dramatically to get that sound out. And also the order of dates and how to say it. So I have students that say, I was born, my birth date is January 1st, 1/1/1972. And you're like, what? No, just January 1st, 1972. We don't say the 1/1 part. That stands for January 1st. So getting that to be more natural, where they're saying the name of the month rather than the number of the month. And that could be that you have to associate the numbers with each month to get it to be more natural and easy. And this is, oh, you can also extend this to civics. So who was the first president? Who was the second president? Who was the third president? And colonies. The first colony was Delaware. And so you can go through and use these numbers both for calendars and dates and for certain civics concepts and also for children. And so this is another strategy of like extending a theme throughout your different teaching. Dialogue is super helpful. So students just want to know what sounds good, what they should be saying. And we can provide that. So there is all the worksheets are dialogue worksheets that you can use and do dialogue a lot with your student. Test them out. You know, have you ever been a habitual drunkard? No. What is a habitual drunkard? Someone who drinks too much alcohol. If you want to like amp that up a little bit, you can say, have you ever been a habitual drunkard? No, I'm not an alcoholic. And that kind of ends the sentence. So you can use dialogue a lot. And it's good practice because that's what they're going to be doing when they take their test. It's all a conversation. Our Google Classroom has dialogue for every section. Asking for repetition or clarification. This is super important. Just letting the applicants know that it's okay and encouraged to ask questions to help them feel a little calmer or to not rush through their answers. I encourage my students to just slow down and ask a question, even if they're asking a question on every single thing. Can you repeat that, please? Can you speak slower? Can you say that in a different way? These are all different questions that they can use to ask for either repetition or clarification. And it's a test taking and interview strategy to slow down the pace so that they're not making mistakes because they're going too fast. They can also ask for repetition during the civics test. And that's also encouraged. It's better to ask for repetition than to say the wrong thing too fast. And resources. So if you are teaching citizenship currently or have been recently matched, you probably have gotten a Voices of Freedom textbook for you and your student. It's blue. Let me take my background filter off of here. Looks like this. If you have this, page 213 to 226 has sample dialogues already in here. Literacy Pittsburgh, YouTube videos. We have a whole series on N400. Our Google Classroom for tutor use, which I'll show you in a moment. New Readers Press has a worksheet, not a worksheet, but a glossary for some of the tricky vocabulary in part 12, which is that yes, no section. And also Literacy Pittsburgh can conduct a mock interview with your students. So if they're getting ready and their interview's coming up and they want to practice, just ask your coordinator, or you can email me at citizenship@literacypittsburgh.org and we can arrange for a mock interview.
Nicole?
Uh-huh.
There's one other resource that that I discovered fairly recently that I think is useful for some students. And that is another textbook that kind of goes along with the Voices of Freedom that is specific to the interview.
Okay.
I have one student studying for the test who had lots of questions her tutor couldn't answer about the questions themselves. And so this book goes through.
Is it this one?
It might.
The activity and test prep workbook?
It's not an activity book, no.
Okay.
Really just dialogues based on each of the questions.
Okay.
So, and it talks about things like, if the student in this dialogue, the person answers this way, this is likely to have this consequence.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a different take on the whole thing. So just want to offer that up. Christina knows what it is. I'm sorry, I can't think of what it's called.
Okay. Well, if you do find out what it is called, let me know and we can add it to our list. And I'm going to share with you, where'd it go? Okay. Can you see the Google Classroom on the shared screen? Okay, so this is for tutor use and it's organized by topic, by section of the N400. So part 1 is the pre-interview and eligibility screening questions. Then there's, over here, you can find what part you're looking for. Oh, I want to talk about travel because my student travels all the time. You can go to part 9. And there will be, what you do is then click on this like bar here and it'll open, it'll open up to instructions. Mine looks a little different because I'm the teacher. Okay, so it'll have like a worksheet, a slideshow, a link for YouTube, and a link for Quizlet. And all of those things are aligned together with similar vocabulary and definitions. So if I click on the worksheet, you can see here's a sample dialogue sheet. Have you ever taken any trips outside the US during the last 5 years? Yes or no? If it's no, then you don't have to do this part. Then how many total days? How many trips? When did you leave? When did you return? Where did you go? So that's a sample of what it looks like and what they can answer, possible ways they can answer. Then the slideshow you can use with either PowerPoint or Google Slides. And these are the same slideshows that I use in the YouTube videos. And it goes into a little more like with the how many and some of the question words where some students do have a difficult time with the WH questions because they sound kind of similar. How many total days on your last trip? When did you leave? And this one can be a little confusing, the how many total days, because they want to know how many total days in the last 5 years. So they have to add all their trips together for the last 5 years. And then it will have a link to the video on YouTube. And they can watch that for follow-up practice. And finally, it'll have a Quizlet, which is an online flashcard site. And there's on one side is a word and on the other side is the definition. And they can go to the next one. They can also hear a human voice saying these so that they can get the pronunciation down. And we try to use the pictures that are also in our slideshow and also on the videos. So each section has one or all of these elements. Some of the sections may not have a video yet, or some of the sections may not have one other element, but every section has at least one thing in there that you can use for that part of the N400. And those, I believe I know there are instructions on the Tutor Hub for how to access those resources.
There are, Nicole.
Yeah.
I was just trying to access them myself.
Okay.
I'm not sure that the code is correct.
Okay, hold on. Let me, can you see the Tutor Hub now on my screen? Okay. So it's a little funky getting there, but like if you go to ESL and then specific goals and then citizenship and culture. Right here at the very top, N400 interview resources for tutors. And right in there are instructions on how to access the Google Classroom so that you can see all of those things that are available.
Can you email us those steps?
Yeah. We can also just email you the document that tells you how to do it, so you don't have to go through all those steps.
But those individual steps might be helpful.
Sure. Any questions about strategies or the interview process?
The 100 questions, that comes after going over the N400? Is that what you're suggesting?
Not necessarily. It can be either
Okay.
before or after. It depends on the officer. So sometimes they will sometimes they will do the N400 part first. Sometimes they'll do civics first. The order depends on the officer.
So when you say civics, that's the 100 questions
100
that I'm
questions.
asking her. Okay. Because I think, I don't know, I started with her after someone else was with her. She knows all the answers, but I did not really go over that N400. So this has been very helpful.
Okay.
So when I meet with her on Fridays, that's when I meet, I'll ask her for that N400 and we'll go through this.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you don't necessarily have to look at her copy of the N400. You just have to like go over those worksheets and
Okay.
she should be able to give you the answers.
Okay.
She's willing to share it. That's great.
She actually showed it to me at one point, and I wasn't sure, I'm kind of new to the citizenship, but so this has been really helpful for me. I was like, whoa,
Yeah, it gets overlooked a lot because people think of 100 questions and that's it.
And that's it. And
this part's a lot harder.
Yeah. And this is very, very helpful. Thank you.
What is the normal length of time, Nicole, for an average interview and the whole process, the interview and the questions?
So like on the day that they go for their interview?
Yes.
I think it's usually around a half an hour, give or take. It probably depends on the individual and,
So they're really not asking 100 questions.
No.
No, they get asked 10 questions.
10 questions.
Yeah.
And then the rest is interview and small talk. Okay.
And reading and writing is in there. So the reading test is really simple. They'll be showed a question. They have to say the question out loud. They don't have to answer it. The writing test, the officer will say a sentence. The applicant has to write what they hear. They only have to answer one of each of those correctly to pass. And they can be asked up to 3 reading and 3 writing. So depending on the student, if your student is highly literate, that's super easy. If you have a student that struggles with literacy and is just learning to read and write in English, that may be the most difficult part for them.
When you say that they need to write the sentence that the officer has spoken, can they use either cursive or print
They can, but they're actually writing on an iPad.
But I
Um,
thought, yeah.
Yeah,
Oh,
so, yep, they're writing on an iPad that's mounted in front of them in the officer's room. And I don't know if they're using a stylus or their finger. They can actually request paper and pen if they're not really comfortable with writing on the iPad. They should do that at the beginning. I don't know. I've had one officer that said no to one of the students. I don't know, understand why. I think there might have been a language barrier there, but I've only heard of one student where that was denied. So they should be saying yes and giving them paper and pen if they ask for that. But yes, as long as it's legible. Also, punctuation is not super important. Capitalization is not super important. As long as they can see that they understood. So if they say Washington was the first president and they wrote Washington was first president, they forget the, and they don't capitalize anything, that's fine. They'll pass. But if they wrote like, you know, Washington DC is the capital instead, then of course they're not going to pass. So they're looking that they understand and are able to write down what they hear and that it's basically communicated. So the smaller words can be a little less important, like the, is, and that kind of stuff. And if your student is good at writing, you can go through like the correct capitalization and the good punctuation and those apostrophes for, I think there's President's Day has the apostrophe after the S. But if you have a student that struggles in that area, you don't have to worry about those things as long as they're getting the general idea across.
How strict are they for exact spelling other than punctuation? Like, I mean, I'm just thinking all my Spanish speakers.
Yeah, they're not
struggle
super
with
strict on
spelling.
that. Yeah, they're not super strict on that. So if they, if they mix up the A and the E, the E and the O, it's probably not a big deal. As long as basically they can understand what they wrote.
Okay, good.
Yeah, but if it's completely messed up, then yeah, they probably won't pass, but they'll get 2 more chances then. And there is like a limited list of words that they will use on it. So it's not like anything goes. It's related to the civics content.
Oh,
Nicole,
okay. So
if-
if they can write, if I can dictate to them like all the civics questions and they can write them down roughly, then, we're clear.
Not the civics questions. Those are too hard. So there is a vocabulary list that can be shared with you.
Okay.
Did you say you have a citizenship student now, or you're like,
I'm just starting. She mentioned it back at the beginning.
okay,
She started in April, but Hannah's just now connecting me. It's
okay.
a long story.
Yeah. So anyway, there's like a citizenship tutor training that's like a separate thing on Thinkific that will go over that.
Okay. I haven't
yeah,
done it yet.
yeah.
I just got enrolled. Thank you.
Yeah. And the USCIS has a list of, this is the exact vocabulary that could be on the writing test or could be on the reading test. It could be in any order. But the reading test is always a question form. The writing test is always a sentence form. It's often the answer to the question. So if the reading test is who was the first president, the writing test might be Washington was the first president. So it's pretty basic. Some of the harder ones are like Independence Day, just because it's long, and freedom of speech, Bill of Rights. Some of those are on the harder end. And then the question words are hard for some students, the who, what, where, when, why, and how. So those can be a challenge for some students.
Nicole, if retesting is required, are they just retested on the part they failed?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
You mentioned one of the founding documents. How specifically do they ask questions about the Constitution or the Bill of Rights or the Declaration of Independence or any other foundational documents?
So there's a list of 100 questions. And so like one of them is, what is the supreme law of the land, the Constitution? When was the Constitution written? The Federalist Papers supported the passage of the US Constitution. Name one of the writers. what happened at the Constitutional Convention, when was the Declaration of Independence adopted, who wrote the Declaration of Independence, what are two rights or freedoms in the Declaration of Independence, what is one right or freedom in the First Amendment. So they're pretty specific, and there's correct answers given that they can answer. And they're not going to be asked to further explain any of those. It's a very simple, they answered it correctly or they didn't. They'll be asked up to 10 questions. The 10 questions are kind of weighted. So they'll get a combination of difficulty. The officer doesn't know what questions they're going to ask until they start. And they can answer 6 questions correctly, then they pass. So that means they can answer 4 incorrectly. But if they answer the first 6 correctly, they'll be finished asking them and they can move on to the next part of the test. Same with writing and reading. If they read that first question out loud and it's correct, they pass and they can go to writing. So they're not like tortured through answering a bunch of questions. Maximum is 10 civics questions. They do need to study all 100 though, because nobody has any idea which questions they'll be asked. What other questions do you have?
Nothing right
What
now.
happens after they complete the interview? What happens next?
Okay, yeah. So if they pass or they don't pass, it doesn't matter. They will be given a document that says you passed the test. Congratulations. You know, we're recommending you for, we're recommending your application. Can't remember the exact wording, for citizenship, basically. It basically goes to like a supervisor after that. So they're not giving them like an absolute decision that day. So if they pass, they'll say, we're recommending you for citizenship. Then they'll get a letter in the mail that gives them a date to go to an oath of allegiance ceremony. The oath ceremony is required. They must go to that. That's where they are under oath again, and they swear to protect the United States and bear arms if necessary, and that they understand and support the US Constitution. They support the United States form of government. They are giving up allegiance to their former country. And at that ceremony, they're also giving up their green card, and they'll get a certificate of naturalization. And they'll say the Pledge of Allegiance. Sometimes they're in like a special place. Like I've been to one at the History Center downtown, which was a really beautiful place for one. Sometimes they're in libraries. Sometimes they're at the same place at the USCIS building in Monroeville. They can be in courtrooms. We've actually had them at Literacy Pittsburgh before. So right now, I don't think they're public ceremonies anymore. But hopefully once COVID is through and our numbers are down, they'll go back to being public ceremonies where anyone can go, because they're really special ceremonies.
They used to be in the federal courthouse downtown.
Yeah, sometimes they still are. Yeah, it varies. They can have them in any place as long as they have a qualified officer to deliver the ceremony.
I might have misheard. Did you say that the officer can tell them that they passed right there verbally?
They tell them that they're recommending them. They pass the
Recommending.
test and they're
Yeah, recommend.
recommending them to proceed with citizenship.
Or that they're not recommending?
So usually they're not going to say, I'm not recommending. Usually what they'll say is that your application can't be decided today. And
Okay.
it'll go under further review. And then they'll get more letters explaining something. So I've actually in recent times, never heard of this before, but I've had several students that have had 3rd interviews because of some kind of clarification needed on the N400. And so if they answered some of those questions in part 12 as yes, they might need to provide more documentation, more clarification.
Is the N400 similar to what happens when a person is vetted?
Vetted for,
Credit
Time
for
offers.
entrance into the United States.
I'm not really an expert
Yeah.
on the green card process, but it
Okay.
you know, it probably is similar, but the basic things that they're asking for their eligibility. So are you a green card holder for at least 5 years? Are you married to a United States citizen? Are you over 18? It asks for their location, their current address to establish residency. It asks for any travel outside the United States. Applicants have to live more time in the United States than out of the United States. So if they travel for 9 months out of every year, they're probably not eligible. And it asks for information about their children, if their parents are citizens, how do they support themselves, if they work, if they go to school. It asks basic like demographic info, their race, their ethnicity, their height, their weight, their eye color, their hair color. It asks if they're requesting accommodations because of a disability. It asks for what's section 8? Parents, children, marriage, marital status is a big one. What's your current marital status? If they've had more than one marriage, they'll ask about their previous spouse or spouses. They can even ask about their previous spouse if they're married now, if they're a citizen. There's a lot of questions that could be asked about that. Then part 12 are those like moral character questions. So there's a section on like general affiliations, and that's like, have you ever been a member of the Communist Party? Were you ever a member of the Nazi government of Germany? Are you a member of any groups or organizations? And then there's like those, they call it the crime section. Have you ever been a habitual drunkard? Although I don't really know that that's a crime. But anyway, they do ask that. Have you ever procured someone for prostitution? Have you ever hurt someone on purpose? Have you ever killed somebody? Did you ever torture somebody? Have you ever had military or weapons training? Have you ever been deported? So there's a lot of questions in that section. Then they have a section on the oath of allegiance. So do you support the United States Constitution and form of government? And they could be asked follow-up questions there about like, what is an oath? What is allegiance? What is loyalty? And then there's a section on if they had an interpreter that helped them, they should be able to say who it was and what their address is. If they had legal representation, they should be able to say who their lawyer was. And they also have to say that they understand their application in English, and they don't have any questions about it. So there's a lot in there. I'm not sure what's on the green card application, but yeah.
Have you ever had a situation where a man was asked if he had more than one wife and he said yes, because he comes from a country or a religion where he's permitted to have more than one wife at a time?
I haven't personally, so I don't know what would happen with that, but that could be a disqualification for citizenship because it's against the law of the United States to have more than one wife.
So who can answer, since I'm just getting started, like Hannah's going to meet with me Friday, who can answer my questions about like green card and stuff at that level? Like, I guess Hannah's probably already screened my one student for citizenship eligibility to study it, but I don't know. How can I haven't studied that stuff. I don't even know how you get a green card.
But what you would ask your student, do you have a green card?
I'm allowed to ask that.
That,
You're
yeah.
not going to be matched with a student that doesn't have a green card, first of all. So you're not going to be matched with a student that doesn't have a green card for citizenship. We already did that for you. So if you're getting a student that's matched with us, they have a green card and they're eligible. You don't have to worry about that. They just have to be able to verbalize how they're eligible. I have a green card for more than 5 years. I'm over 18.
Okay.
Yeah. So you don't have to do any vetting. You don't have to decide if they're eligible or not eligible. That's legal services. We just help them with how to talk about it.
Okay, sweet. Thank you.
Yeah.
I have a question.
Mhm.
How often do tutors for citizenship meet per week? Twice a week normally, like normal?
I mean, that would be great.
Yeah,
That's
it
a
does.
really
That
good
the ideal
question,
would be
John.
like twice a week. I don't know what average is.
Yeah, I know my student right now is busy with work, so we're lucky we meet once a week. But
Yeah.
the other question is, I've always had trouble with students and homework.
Hmm.
And so I think with this kind of citizenship, they would be motivated to do homework, but I suppose they might not either.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm of the philosophy that I don't really check homework. You can do it or you don't do it. I don't know. It's
Right,
up to the
right,
student.
yeah.
It's their thing that they're trying to study. So you can give
Their
it,
responsibility.
but it is their responsibility. And hopefully they are putting everything into it, but can't guarantee that.
Okay, thanks.
Are you aware of any newspapers that are published, at a fairly modest reading level, specifically for people who are becoming citizens, will shortly become citizens, or studying to become citizens, have just become citizens? Has anyone published a newspaper or periodical, even online, a regular newsletter for them? Or does Literacy Pittsburgh publish something for them to read and to?
I think the closest thing that exists right now that we have a membership to is News for You. And an article about that was in one of the more recent tutor newsletters.
There's News and Levels. These are not specific. I don't think there's anything exactly what you're asking that is
Yeah.
specifically for new citizens or people studying for citizenship, but there are news sources that do have leveled either reading or videos. And Voice of America is one of them. And News and Levels is another one. And then I think it's called like English for You. I can't remember the exact name of it. Yeah.
There used to be,
Elizabeth Clare, she does one.
I don't know that she's still doing anything. I think
Okay.
she's just retired.
Yeah.
So I don't think that was continued. So I think News for You is,
News for You. Yep. And English in Levels.
yeah, English and Levels.
Or
Yeah.
news, I'm sorry, News in Levels. I can
News
put this
and
in the
Levels.
chat. Yeah.
Yeah, we used to have the Easy English Times,
Yes.
and we don't have that anymore.
Anymore.
Yeah,
That was Elizabeth Clare, I think. That's the one that she retired.
I see.
Yeah.
Nicole, I have to go, but I want to thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Very informational. I appreciate it.
Thanks for joining.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Yes.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Sounds like no one else has any burning questions. You did good, Nicole.
Thanks.
You answered
Thank
everybody's
you.
burning
Yeah.
questions.
Yeah, this is great.
Yeah,
I-
very helpful.
In the chat, I put the News and Levels and the learningenglish.voanews.com. And on the Voice of America one, they have different levels of like rates of speaking, different levels of vocabulary. So they can choose like a video that's in the beginner, intermediate, or advanced.
USA Learns also has a citizenship class.
Mhm.
No, I can't think what that, it's USA Learns, but I don't know if it's .org or .com. And
Yeah,
that's free.
if we're interested in that, though, we should sign them up as an agency so they can get our code.
Yes. But tutors might want to look at it themselves, is what I'm thinking.
Okay.
It's .org. But most of this stuff is available free on USCIS websites too.
It
It's-
is, but it's a really terrible website, to be honest. I can't find anything every time I go there. I'm going to put my email in here, citizenship@literacypittsburgh.org. You're always welcome to ask me questions about resources, or if specific situations come up and your student has a particular question about their specific application, then we can decide, okay, we either need to refer them for legal services, or no, this is simple, we can answer it. So they're going to ask you a lot of questions. And some of them we can't answer, some of them we can. But the biggest thing is to just like help them with confidence in speaking. And that goes a long way in getting the confidence built up.
I have two questions about the JFCS, SC rather. Do they charge for the legal
No.
consultation? And is there a waiting list to see
Yes.
a lawyer?
There is a waiting list. If they are referred through Literacy Pittsburgh as a Literacy Pittsburgh student, we have a joint grant from the USCIS with them. They get priority, and so they'll be bumped to the top of the list. But there is a wait list. They are slammed right now with refugees from Afghanistan. They do legal services not only for citizenship, but for green cards, for any kind of visa for refugees. So we do have other organizations that we can share contact information. Some of them are free, some of them are low cost. But our partner is JFCS, and they've helped a lot of our students.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So this has been recorded, and I can send out the link to the recording to you after it's finished doing whatever magic it does. Joyce had asked for the steps to use Google Docs. We'll get all that. I'll put that in the mail to you today or
Okay.
tomorrow.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yep, thank you so much.
Thank you. Yes.
Very
Thank you
helpful.
very much.
Have a great afternoon.
Yeah.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
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 Nicole, I have a question for you when
Mhm.
everybody's gone.